one of the all-time favorite shows.
Welcome to What the Phobia. I am your host, the Creepy Journalist. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Welcome. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to What the Phobia. I am your host, the Creepy Journalist, and today I want to do something different with you guys. Lately, it's only been audio and pictures on the videos that I do, and I thought it's time for something just a little bit different. Um, yeah, I think there needs to be more of a human connection to what it is that I like to do, and I think to start this today, I want to share a story with you. It's a cold case, um, so to speak. Um, Everything that I'll be telling you today, I'm going to actually be directly reading it from this book because, frankly, I've been searching and researching and searching and researching, and I cannot find anywhere where I can get this information for this particular case. Is on the closest thing I could find is on Wikipedia, but it's basically what's in the book. And the book that I'm referring to is The Invention of Murder: How the Victorians Reveled in Death and Detection and Created Modern Crime. It's a very good read. I'm not even halfway done with this. It's a decently sized book. Let's see how many pages. Since I have 530, I think, reading pages, because they're mostly just like acknowledgments and stuff. Let me see. Okay, so I would say it's 466 pages of straight up reading. This is written by Judith Flanders, and to be honest, Judith got down with putting in the work to find a lot of this stuff out because she takes you from basically how the era, how the time period was to how it became. How it is present day is what I'm trying to say. And props to her because man, that is hard work. And to put a book like this together is very difficult because there are a lot of cases here that don't you can't really find them everywhere. You know, I don't know if this is just a Victorian thing. You know, just they just don't document shit. I don't know. But Judith Flanders figured it out. She cracked the code, people. She cracked the code and she figured it out. So I'm gonna be taking bits and pieces of what she says. Some parts I will read straight up from the book because, like I said, I've done my own research and it's I'd rather let her tell you and then we talk about it. So that's what I'll be doing. Plus, I want to put the person uh, aspect in here as well while I hang out with you guys, have some coffee. You saw me light my candle. Nope, still too hot. Don't want to burn my shit. So, without further ado, let's go. So, the first case that I would like to speak about is about the Mars family. There is an episode that I was gonna do that I connected to irrelevant dots called the Mars and Moors, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But what I am going to do is just explain to you what happened with the Mars family. Okay? So, chapter 1, Imagining Murder. This is all from Judith, okay? Pleasant it is, no doubt, to drink tea with your sweetheart, but most disagreeable to find her bubbling in the tea urn. So wrote Thomas de Quincey in 1826. And indeed, it is hard to argue with him, but even more pleasant, he thought, was to read about someone else's sweetheart bubbling in the tea urn. And that, too, is hard to argue with. For crime, especially murder, is very pleasant to think about in the abstract. It is like hearing blustery rain on the window pane when sitting indoors. It reinforces a sense of safety, even of pleasure, to know that murder is possible, just not here. At the start of the 19th century, it was easy to think of murder that way. Capital convictions in the London area, including all of the outlying villages, were running at a rate of one a year. In all of England and Wales in 1810, just 15 people were convicted of murder out of a population of nearly 10 million. So that's a 15th of a percent out of every 100,000 people. So, when on the night of December, sorry, when on the night of 7th December 1811, a 24-year-old Hosier, named Timothy Marr, his wife, their baby, and a 14-year-old apprentice were all found brutally murdered in their shop on the Ratcliffe Highway in the East End of London. The cozy feeling evaporated rapidly. The year 1811 had not been kind to the working classes. The French wars had been running endlessly, and with Waterloo 4 years in the future, there was no sense that peace, and with it prosperity, would ever return. Instead, hunger was ever present. The wars and bad harvests had savagely driven up the price of bread. In the early 1790s, wheat had cost between 48 cents and 58 cents. A quarter in 1800, it was 113 cents. Now she put S. I don't know what that means. I'm just going to say cents because I don't know what that means. So she's painting a picture for us. She's letting us know how bad it is, and in the East End of London is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. It's what most people would call like someplace like the ghetto or like the project. Something just a bad, poor, bad area. You know, whatever your definition of that may be, you know, that's you. But basically, just a bad part of town, okay? And the Ratcliffe Highway is where most people would just passerbys. So the fact that people were even getting murdered in this area was very common, only because there is so many people just passing by. You never know who you are going to meet unless you live there. You know the locals. And if you live anywhere for a certain amount of time, you know, you'll know exactly who's supposed to be there and who's not, who's out of place and who's not. Okay? The murder of the Mars, however, was more dramatic than the slow deaths of so many from hunger, or the faraway deaths of soldiers and sailors in the unending war, and the story was soon everywhere. The Ratcliffe Highway was a busy, populous working class street in a busy The Ratcliffe Highway was a busy, populous working class street in a busy, populous working class area near the docks. At around midnight on the evening of his death, Marr was ready to shut up shop. So most of the time, you know, these shops at the time would be working anywhere from like 12 to 14 hours because there's no money. You need to stay open as long as possible. Work hard hours to make that dough, make that bread. You know what I mean? The hosier sent his servant, Margaret Jewel, to pay an outstanding bill at the baker's and to buy the family supper. After paying the bill, she looked for an oyster stall. Oysters were a common supper food, being cheap, on sale at street stalls, and needing no cooking. The first stall she came to had shut up for the night, and looking for another, she lost her bearings. This was before. This is 1811, guys. Okay, this is not the time where we have modern technology, as far as like light bulbs, lighted streets. So to paint a picture for you, everything is dark. There's a lamppost, a gas lamppost, every couple of so yards or feet or however long it was, and the police are not like what we have today. We have cars running up and down the street, squad cars running up and down the street. In some areas, we have cops on bicycles all the time. But this is 1811, East End of London. There is not that much police. The police department wasn't really a big thing. It was a more of a set of people that took it upon themselves to patrol at night and make sure that their community was safe. Kind of like what we have today in our, what is it? Community watch, something like that. Um, the first stall she came to had shut up for the night, and looking for another, she lost her bearings. Before, gaslighting streets had only been the occasional oil lamp in the window to guide passersby, and was away for longer than expected. She returned around 1 a.m. She knocked and knocked again. She heard scuffling, someone breathing on the other side of the door, but no one opened it. That's some scary shit. If you are going home because you're a servant to somebody and you are trying to get back inside and they're not opening and you're breathing, that's a dead giveaway. You leave. You don't go in there, especially when you know that the family that you're working for is supposed to be there and they're expecting you to come back. Doesn't matter how late it was. They knew you were going to come back. They would have waited. She stopped the parish watchman on his rounds, telling him she knew the Mars were in there. She had even heard them, but no one was answering the door. He had passed by earlier, he said, and had tapped on the window to tell Mar that one of his shutters was loose. A man called out, "We know it." Now he wondered who he had spoken to. Something's going on in this house, and somebody clearly told this watchman, like, "Yo, it's cool, man, don't worry about it." And the watchman obviously thought it was Mr. Mar, but clearly whatever had happened by then was already too late. So attracted the attention of Mar's next door neighbor, a pawnbroker. From his window, he could see that Mar's back door was open. With the encouragement of the neighbors and the watchman, he climbed the fence between the houses and entered. Some say it was the watchman who had entered. Those are reports, though, so, lost in translation, I guess. Whichever man it was, once inside, he found a scene from a horror film. Mar and his apprentice were lying in the shop, battered to death. The apprentice had been attacked so ferociously that fragments of his brain were later found on the ceiling. Blood was everywhere. Mrs. Mar was lying dead, halfway to the door leading downstairs. The pawnbroker staggered to the front door, shouting, "Murder! Murder has been done!" And the watchman swung his rattle to summon help. Soon an officer from the Thames Division Police Office appeared. Meanwhile, Margaret Jewell rushed in with a group of excited bystanders looking for the baby. They found him lying in his cradle in the kitchen, his throat cut. Some money was scattered on the shop counter, but 150 whatever it was, pounds, I guess. But 150 pounds Mar had tucked away was untouched. On the counter lay an iron ripping chisel, which seemed not to have been used. In the kitchen, covered with blood and hair, was a ship's. Oh, I'm sorry. Which seemed not to have been used. In the kitchen, covered with blood and hair, was a ship's carpenter's peen maul, a hammer with sharpened ends. A razor or knife must have been used on the baby, but none was found. Outside the back door were 2 sets of bloody footprints, and a babble of voices reported that a couple of men, maybe more, no one was quite sure, had been seen running away from the general direction of the Mars house at more or less the right time. In the morning, a magistrate from the Thames Division Police Office took over the case. An officer from the Thames Division Police Office had responded the night before, and therefore the magistrates of the Thames office were now in charge. So, this is enough for right now. I will relate to you the rest as I understand it. Basically, the family was all dead. The only person that survived this was Miss Jewell, the servant. Sorry, my dog's going crazy. She had left to go buy supper, go pay a bill. She came back really late, and when she got back, these people, this person, whoever had committed the crime, was still inside the house. So she was gone maybe an hour, and in that hour, somebody saw that she left. Most likely, somebody had picked up the Peen Mall, got Mr. Mars first, and then went for the rest of the family. Got the son, got the baby, got the wife. That's pretty fucked up. Not only that, these people still had the nerve to stick around and not even steal shit. There was no, if they wanted to steal, they would have just stolen. Whoever came into the house was coming with the intent to kill the Mars family, if not at least Mr. Marr. And then the rest, were just collateral. It's from what it seems like. Because in the events following this, about 2 weeks had passed. And in those 2 weeks, nobody was found. People were brought in just like they would for any investigation. They were questioned, and people wanted to assign blame just to put it close to the case, but nothing stuck because everybody had alibis or the people just weren't guilty. There was nothing that you could find on these particular criminals or people that were arrested. So when it came down to it, the Thames Police Division really had nothing solid on anyone. It wasn't until later, further investigation of the evidence, that they found that the Peen Mall, basically the hammer, had initials on it. Okay, let me see if I can find you the exact page for that information. Okay, but while I'm looking for this, yes, wow. So while these guys were looking for the culprit, the suspect, it was found that the Peen Mall had the initials JP, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, now at the time, before I go and continue with the hammer, when you wanted to, shake up the community, there would be flyers everywhere, and the word had to be spread, and there was a big reward for whoever could bring in information or even a person or a name as to who could have done this heinous crime. Um, for days, for about 2 weeks, nothing showed up, nothing solid. Nobody had any clue as to what had happened. Now there was a theory. The theory was that this was gang related at the time. Like I said, people are poor, people are going to do anything to get money. But the fact that these people, even if there was multiple people, multiple assailants that attacked the family, they still didn't do a good job of looking for money and getting away. Which makes me believe that even though they had time, they didn't take advantage. So that means that they weren't there for the money. They were there maybe for a thrill, maybe a gang initiation. They had to kill a family, and this just happened to be that family. So when it came down to the evidence, they found a hammer having the initials JP inscribed on this hammer. The hammer had belonged to a sailor by the name of John Peterson. Okay, now Peterson had the perfect alibi. He wasn't even around. He was out in sea. He was out in sea. He wasn't in England, you know. He was a fisherman, if I'm not mistaken. That was the hammer that he used, that he lent to Mr. Marr to use for, whatever things that he needed to get done for the shop. So Peterson wasn't even in England at the time of these killings, at the time of these murders. Okay? So let's fast forward to who had lent those tools out to Mars. The last person to have that hammer before Mr. Marr was a gentleman by the name of John Williams. John Williams used to be a fellow lodger, basically a roommate to Peterson. And Peterson said, "Hey, hold on to my tools for me. These are mine. Hold on to them. Don't let nobody use them." Whatever the case was, that was the last person to own them. I think I misspoke and I said that they were lent out to Mr. Marr. No, they were lent. Peterson had lent them out to Williams. Williams was the last person to own that hammer, or at least have possession of it. So, if we're doing correct police work, we want to question Williams. Williams, what the hell? Where were you on said night? So let's pause that right there and let's go to what happened with Williams. Okay, so before we get to what had happened to Williams, okay, um, so when they went and arrested Williams, Williams was they brought him to, they picked him up and they took him to jail, and they were going to hold him until they figured out what they were going to do with him as far as with the judicial system. I'm sorry. And basically, what had happened was that on the night that they were going to go convict him, they found Williams in his cell, dead. He had killed himself. So the crowd was very eager to put the blame on this man who never actually confessed, but they took his suicide as confession. Now, that doesn't necessarily tie all the loose ends, because here's what had happened later on. On 19th of December, a watchman found John Turner, half dressed and gibbering with fear, scrambling down a new gravel lane a few hundred yards from the Ratcliffe Highway. He had gone to bed early at his lodgings above a public house. After closing time, he heard screaming. He went part way down the stairs where he saw a stranger bending over a body on the floor. After a panicky attempt to leave via the skylight, Turner tied his bedsheets together and slid out of the window into the yard, shouting, "They're murdering people in the house," is what he shouted. The watchman was quickly joined by neighbors, and they broke in through the cellar door to find yet again bodies lying with their heads beaten in and their throats cut. The body of John Williamson, the publican, was in the cellar. His wife Elizabeth had been in the kitchen with their servant Bridget. Only the Williamsons' granddaughter, asleep upstairs, had escaped. Once more, money was scattered about, but little of value had been taken. Once more, the escape was via the back door and over the yard fence. The newspapers covered the story widely, but the information they gave was not terribly helpful. The Edinburgh Annual Register described John Turner as being about 6 feet in height, while the Times said he was a short man with a lame leg. Now, whatever people were saying as far as describing the people that died or what have you, they okay, it's not that it doesn't matter, it's just that people weren't taking it too seriously because it wasn't accurate. Not everybody was on the same page as far as description. Okay, if you're talking about a person that killed somebody and everybody saw this person, but you have two different sources of information saying that they looked, one person said it was fat, one person said it was skinny. That's not being on the same page. So who the hell did it? That's where the crowd turned to John Williams' suicide. Too much opinions, no facts from the sources, but the only thing that people could agree on was that Williams had committed suicide. Now, this becomes a cold case because at the time there wasn't really a big forensic department, when it came down to 1810, 1811. those years were pretty lame on tech and police work. Um, it was the incidents, these particular murders, the Williamsons and the Mars family, that set off a chain for London to get on it when it came down to patrolling their city. Now, if I'm wrong, let me know. This is just from the things that I've read, things that I've researched. Things were already probably kicking into gear, but the lack of evidence and lack of police work really was showing until the police tightened down after that. They're like, hey, you know what? We got to keep it together. Light up the streets, put more officers, get these people together, make districts here, make districts there. The big mystery when it comes down to these incidences that happened 2 weeks apart was, how did these people, this person, the perpetrators, the attackers, get away with it? One. And two, it's very weird that nobody saw who the person was. Now, let's assume that Williams did it. Done deal. We have proof. I mean, we have a hammer that was last in possession with, it was the last person that owned it, the last person that had it in their possession was Williams. So there's one dot, there's two dots, connect them. He was the murderer. But the thing is, he killed himself. So, how do you judge a man that's dead when you don't have sufficient proof? That's hard. That's hard, and that's where policing has to take place. But this is a story, cold case, because there is no solid proof, that I wanted to share with you guys, and I wanted to try this out. What the phobia coffee candles me. I love coffee. Now, if there are any other stories that you would like for me to research, maybe stories that are actually out there that have evidence and maybe a story that I can tell you guys, that'd be great. If not, I mean, either way, check out this book, The Invention of Murder by Judith Flanders. It cost me like what? Less than $20. It's a good read. It'll keep you entertained for hours, days, months. I don't know how long it takes for people to read. But after that, I have other stuff that I want to talk about. Unsolved mysteries. Other things, other stuff. The idea is putting out more content via this medium instead of just audio. Maybe give you more of a personal touch, show you the gestures, the body language, the coffee drinking. Let me know if you guys like this type of setup. It's gonna be a cold winter, and I have no desire to be outside too much, so I will be trying to spend as much time as I can researching and talking to you guys. Until next time, stay very creepy, my friends.